Hello, I wanted to demonstrate one way of organizing LogiX for projects. There are lots and lots of ways to organize your LogiX, and I'm not claiming that this is any better than any other method, but it's something I've been using the last few weeks, and it works well for me. I tried to take a video demonstrating how a few of my prior projects were organized, and I don't think it would have made sense to anyone except myself. So instead, what I'm going to try to do here is put together a simple project and show you how I organize things as I go. Maybe someone will find this useful for organizing their own project. So I think what I will build here is a super simple moving platform. You could call it a vehicle if you want, but that would probably be an exaggeration. We have our object, and the organizational structure I have been using is to create a slot called LogiX that all the big chunks of LogiX will go under, which is there'll be subslots under that. I won't pack anything in that directly, and I'll create a slot called settings, and that's where my constants go. And I'll create another slot called data, and that's where all my variables go. So settings, data, LogiX. I think what I'll do for this example is I'll add two buttons on here, one that increases velocity and one that decreases velocity. So under settings, these are my constants. I create another slot for each constant, and I name it, which is very handy because then I can go find them and change them quickly. That's how many times per second the timer will run. So I'll attach a component, data, value field. It's a float, so I want a value field of float, which is in here somewhere. So now I'll use that in my LogiX, and whenever I want to go change the update rate, I don't have to unpack any LogiX. I just go to settings, update rate, and edit it in the inspector. So another constant that I will need is when you click the accelerate or decelerate button, how much does it change the velocity by? I'll call it acceleration rate. Another value field float. Under data, that's where I place my variables, and I use more of these value fields for my variables. You could use LogiX variables, and they would work essentially the same way. But the problem here is that the LogiX variables, usually they pack with your LogiX. So if you want to go edit them, you have to start looking through all these LogiX nodes, and it's just named like float. It doesn't have a name. Now, I suppose you could pack your variables a different place than the rest of the LogiX. But if you put all your variables as value fields here, they're easy to find, they're easy to edit, and they can have names. Except I need to create a new slot, not attach it to here. So what kind of variables do I need for this? I will need velocity. Most vehicles, this would be a float 3 because you could have it moving in X, Y, and Z, and a combination of them, so it might be moving off that way. But we'll just make this move forwards and back. We'll stick with the float for velocity. And the advantage of using either value fields or variables is that you can separate your LogiX into smaller pieces, separate functions basically, and have them read from and write to the variables. And when you go to pack your LogiX, they'll split on the variable. So you can pack your LogiX into separate, smaller pieces rather than one big chunk. I mean, you could, for your constants, you could use inputs, just have a float input node. And that's fine. You could do that, but that means that everything that references this constant will always pack together because they're connected here. And if you use a variable instead, then you can pack this bit of logic separate from this bit of logics and maintain smaller pieces of logics. And also, if you have things in here, in these input nodes, they'll all pack in your logics folder, and then you have to go find them if you want to change it or unpack your logics to edit it. Here, you don't have any trouble finding it because it's named, and you don't have to unpack your logics to go in and edit it. So if you want to change the update rate or the acceleration rate, there's no unpacking and repacking logics. You just edit it in the inspector. But let me actually show you how that works instead of just talking about it. So what do we have for LogiX functions? So the primary LogiX function here would be your update, right? That would be the one that has a timer that fires X number of times per second and adds velocity to position to make this move. So this is our update function. It just takes the current position, adds the velocity times the update interval to the Z position only, that way, and sets the global position again. So under LogiX, update, set packing route, and we'll just pack that away. And now we can continue working on other functions without ever looking at that update code again. It's nicely packed away, and we don't need to connect anything else to it because everything else we can access through our value field variables and our value field settings. So this obviously is not doing anything, and that's because the velocity is currently 0. Now if I set this to 1, it takes off. Set it to -1 to get it to come back. Okay, that works fine. Now we want to be able to change velocity, and I don't want to have to unpack that update to do that. I want to keep all my logics nice and separated into small little functions. And just for the sake of expediency, I am going to use buttons. Just Neos UI buttons. Not that. That is a portal. I want these buttons to actually modify the velocity here. So there's my accelerate button pressed event and my decelerate button pressed event. As you can see. And what I want to do when you click those is take the acceleration rate, our constant here, which is in a value field, and we're going to add that to the velocity, which is another value field, except it's under data for variables instead of settings for constants, which that's all arbitrary. You can name them Bob and Fred if you want. Okay, so that should move forwards. That should stop, move backwards, stop, stop. Helps if I actually click the button. Oh, that's all working. I'll just create a new LogiX folder. Call it And sometimes, if there's just a little bit of LogiX, I'll just pack it right under um, the data, the variable that it's editing, instead of creating a whole new LogiX section for it. So, like, I could pack these under the velocity thing, but I'll just put them here. Set packing route, go away. Okay, so we have a working, moving thing. So forward. I think I broke. Not broke. I think I did not get the whatchamacallit, the avatar anchor set up right. That's it. Okay, now I move with it. You can see we have our two separate bits of LogiX, and they are packed separately with no connection. Let's say I want to do one more thing. I want my little platform here to have some wheels. Big wheels. Big chunky wheels, because I'm going to make them rotate, and I want to be able to see when they're rotating. I want the wheels to rotate when it's moving. And I want to show that I can do that without tying into any of the existing LogiX. I only need to reference the value fields that I've created. Now, what's a good speed for a wheel to spin? I mean, we could... let's see. We could vary the speed based on its velocity. You could calculate the circumference and make the wheel rotate at the correct rotational speed for the velocity of the platform based on its circumference and how much distance it covers, but I don't think that's necessary for this simple example. Let's try setting its spinning speed to velocity times, I don't know. How about we make another setting? You see that stopped rotating? That's because this isn't moving. If I get this moving, the wheel rotates. And this LogiX, I'll just pack under the wheel here. When it moves forwards, the tires rotate, which I would say that they need to rotate a little faster. So you saw I added that tire rotation, and it's tied into the velocity of this thing, but none of the LogiX is tied together. It's all nice and separated. And if I want to change how fast those wheels spin, I don't have to open any LogiX. I just go in here and edit this tire spin speed to 100. Now, that looks a little more like it. Now, it may not look right at higher velocities, but that's okay. And again, if I want to change like the update rate, no, I will only update it 10 times a second instead of 20. And obviously that's really jerky. Now, if we wanted to go nice and smooth, let's update it 50 times a second, which would be, let's see, 0.01 would be 100, so 0.02 would be 50. That looks a little smoother, doesn't it? I'm probably getting carried away for a simple example, but I'm going to add one more thing to this. I want something that displays the current velocity. Velocity, 0 meters per second. Yep, that's working. Now see how easy that was to add without even unpacking any LogiX? Without cluttering anything up? Where should we pack that? Let's be lazy and we'll just pack this LogiX right under the text object. Just to show you that you don't need to go and create new stuff in LogiX if you don't want to. So we created a little car thing that you can stand on and go forwards, and the wheels spin and it shows you your current velocity. And if you have to go edit any of the LogiX, it's nice and clean because it's all separated. So if I want to go change the update LogiX, there's the update LogiX. It doesn't have any of the other stuff cluttering it. In fact, let's see what the LogiX on the whole thing looks like. So that's all the LogiX. That's all the LogiX that we created. It is rather cluttered. I see the wheel LogiX is now down in the ground. But if you wanted to go in and edit something here, you've got a lot to look through and no labels, so it's a little hard to tell what you want to go in and edit. But since it's all nicely separated into separate folders and compartmentalized, and all of your settings are editable right in the inspector, that's a lot easier to go in and change. And there's your LogiX functions, there's your constants, there's your variables. If I want to go in and make it accelerate much faster, I can do that. And I didn't have to unpack any LogiX or anything. Just look at the inspector. Anyway, I like this organization. Maybe someone else will find it handy too.